And got it, we touch. And Justin, don't be afraid to jump in if someone is signed on so that we can pay some attention to them duly.
Sure. Yep.
And the time is 2:02. Did somebody just come in or?
Nope.
Just heard? We'll get started a couple of minutes after 2. This is the first meeting of the Lake George Park Commission Ad Hoc Septic Systems Committee, as named by our chairman, Bruce Young, last month or before. I just want to highlight the fact that what today's effort is involving welcome and meeting, going through our meeting schedule and our expectations and our process. And I'm going to simply, just for the sake of posterity, reread the mission of this ad hoc committee. First, I really want to say thanks to everybody who agreed to serve on it. This is not the most romantic subject that the Park Commission's dealt with lately, and but it might end up being a very important one, and that's what we're here to find out. We're here to find out what it is, where septic stand with whether they are affecting the lake or whether they're not. Who's that? Justin, you got a couple people there?
Yep. I'm not sure why I just heard recording in progress again. I know that we have been recording, so I would just continue on track.
All right. Just before I do our introductions, let me just reread what we had prepared quite some time ago about the mission of this committee. Number 1, better understand the overall population of septic systems around Lake George. Number 2, based on literature and field data, determine if those systems pose negative impacts to the current or long-term water quality of the lake. Number 3, if demonstrated that septic systems are impacting public health or the water quality of the lake, identify programmatic and regulatory options to address the issue. Number 4, develop consensus on a preferred option working with New York State DEC, New York State DOH, and local municipalities and partnerships. And 5, implement and/or facilitate the appropriate program to address septic system issues for the long-term health of the lake. And for your information, the Park Commission members that Chairman Young asked to serve is myself as chair, Bill Mason, Kathy LaBombard, and Dave Floyd and Joe Stanek. And he asked me to be the chairman. And as a result of that, the folks in my neighborhood are referring to me as the Septic King. So if you hear those rumors, do your best to stifle them. I'm going to ask each advisory committee member that's on board, and we hope more are coming on, just to give a quick introduction of yourselves and why you think you're here, kind of thing. Tom Snow's not on yet, Justin?
Tom is here.
Yep. He's here.
Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
I'm in a slight disadvantage because
I'm not sure I
don't see everybody. So, Tom, would you be willing to identify yourself, etc.?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tom Snow. I'm with New York State DEC. My background is in water resources management. I'm a water guy here at DEC. One of my program areas is the New York City watershed program, where half the city of New York's drinking water comes from the New York City water supply. And I've been in charge. That's been one of my program areas that I've been in charge with. So part of that is developing what we've developed, a comprehensive watershed protection program. And of course, septics is one of those.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. Kevin.
Glad to help out.
Kevin Kenyon with the New York State DOH.
Yeah, I'm a professional engineer. I work in the Glens Falls district office.
before that, I was down in our central office in Albany, and I worked in the program, the section that dealt with regulation for septic, setting policy. I worked on 75A. Now at the district office, I look at a lot of commercial systems, small commercial systems for stuff we regulate. So restaurants, campgrounds, TRs, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And we doubly appreciate the fact that you're on vacation this week, and so you're not in your office, you're somewhere, and you can reach us electronically. We appreciate your effort. Tom Jarrett, Jarrett Engineering.
Good afternoon. I have been a consultant in the Lake George Basin for longer than I care to remember, and have been involved in a lot of wastewater and stormwater programs throughout the basin and throughout the region. So I look forward to this committee.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. Is Kathy Flack Munsell on, Justin? Okay, Kathy, if you're there, I can't see you, but you could tell us that you're here, etc.
I am, Ken. Thank you very much. Good day to everyone. I'm the CEO of Fort William Henry. I grew up in Lake George, left for a bit, came back, and actually live on Fort George Road. So obviously as a resident and as a business person, very, very willing to support the cleanliness of the lake, being the smartest and the best lake in the world. And I'm looking forward to assisting in all of these endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you. We know your family's had a long interest in the lake and the benefit of the lake and all of those goods. Sue Wilson, I know you're here.
Yes, I am. I'm Sue Wilson. I'm the Deputy Supervisor for the town of Bolton. And I believe I'm here because Bolton has been active in monitoring septic systems with the implementation back in September of 2019 of our septic inspection program. And we just recently adopted a new sewage ordinance with the help of Tom Jarrett and Chris Novitsky.
Very good. Thank you. Walt Lender, you I can see.
Thanks, Ken. Walt Lender, Senior Vice President with the Lake George Association. First time I'm using that one on a Zoom call. New title. I'm representing thousands of members of the Lake George Association who are residents around the lake, all very concerned with the lake's water quality. I'm also a resident myself, business owner separately, and 16 plus years of history working with water quality issues around Lake George. So I look forward to moving this issue forward.
Thank you, Walt. Chris Novitsky, it's Chris here.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invite. Chris Novitsky. I'm still the Lake George waterkeeper, although there's been some changes. My background, professional engineer. My first half of my career, I was in consulting, worked on scores of designing septic systems, and I actually worked with Leo Labuda, who went on to run the Catskill Watershed Corporation's septic replacement program, replacing thousands of systems in New York City watershed. Since being the waterkeeper, I worked with Jim Meacham at Department of Health on the advisory committee to update 75A, worked with several of the communities around the lake, produced the septic initiative report for the town of Lake George, and also, for some of our work on the biomonitoring and algae and septic systems, won an award from NYWIA, the Lynn Enslow Memorial Award, recognizing that work. So just thanks for allowing me to be on the committee. Look forward to it.
Well, thanks for saying yes and being here, Chris. We appreciate it. Dan Baruch.
Sorry for being late.
No problem. You're here. That's the important part.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to keep my intro short. Planning and Zoning Director, Town and Village of Lake George. I am the one that oversees the septic regulations locally in the town. The village does not have any because they're entirely on sewer. I also am the one that coordinates the Consolidated Board of Health here, which is the local entity that deals with sanitary relief. And finally, as Chris just mentioned, we worked hand in hand with the fund and DEC on the Septic Initiative Program, the Town of Lake George Septic Initiative Program, which was started off as a pretty small and modest program and blossomed into a very comprehensive, complex, scientific and geographical analysis of sanitary systems within proximity to water in the town of Lake George, which is being looked at by New York State, I think, to be reutilized at other water bodies in the state. So we're happy about that program, and maybe we can do something similar with this committee.
We hope so. Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Claudia Bramer, are you on?
I haven't seen her yet there, Ken, so we can
Okay.
skip over her for now.
How about Ethan Gaddy? Ethan?
Unmuted
Sorry,
myself.
Ethan.
Hi, I'm a planner with Warren County. Currently, I'm working on administering the septic replacement grant program, learning quite a bit about the condition of people's septic systems around the lake, having a lot of one-on-one conversations with residents and property owners about what sort of issues they're facing, and it's pretty complex.
Good. Well, thank you. And before we move on and continue on, I meant to indicate at the beginning of the meeting, and this is as good a time as any, this is a meeting of the Park Commission Ad Hoc Septic Systems. Even though there are some public folks observing at our discretion, I hope that we have some time that if there's any comments, we'll let them get their comments in, but this is a meeting of the committee. The committee will be reporting to the Lake George Park Commission as a body at its regular monthly meetings, because this is the only meeting that this group is going to be holding, obviously. And we really appreciate the dedication. So you folks that are tuned in that aren't on the committee, don't think we're ignoring you accidentally. We're ignoring you on purpose, just as if you were sitting in the audience and waiting for a chairman to nod to allow you to speak. But you will be, by showing your interest, you will be involved in the process as we move along over the next year. And with that, I just want to mention that Chris Round's also here with Shazen. And Chris, I don't see you anymore, but I know you're in there. Did we lose him?
Nope.
We're right here. Like,
Oh, there we go.
square number
Okay.
2 on my checkerboard. Thanks, Ken. Chris Round with Chasing Companies. We're going to be assisting the Park Commission. Sean Doty is here with me as well. We've been helping in various projects around the lake, included some a minor role in the Lake George Septic Initiative, production of Lake George Data Atlas. We're working on the Village of Lake George Wastewater Treatment Plant. We've been around for a bit here. I'll leave it at that. And we're here to facilitate. We're here and we'll explain a little bit what our role is a little bit later in the agenda.
Okay. Item 2 on our official agenda is to talk about a meeting schedule and talk about the expectations and the process. And we're going to anticipate that the next 3 to 6 months is data gathering and analysis to find out that we are here. Remember, the prime goal is we're going to follow the science on this and go from there. Dave Wick, would you like to comment a little bit on the process?
Yeah, give at least our current internal perspective on things, but that's really what we have invited you all as committee members to chime in with your expertise on, because we want this to be kind of a crowdsourced groupthink, the best kind of is all of us working together idea. But I think the current take from our board of commissioners is that it should take us ballpark 3 to 6 months to get the best understanding that we can of the system, the population of septic systems around Lake George, That's going to be kind of a literature review of the science behind septic systems, phosphorus transport, nitrogen inputs, public safety impacts from failing systems. So the science on one side, and then kind of taking a look at the existing population of septic systems around Lake George. What do we know about them? We have the great benefit of the LGA data atlas worked on, of course, as Chris just mentioned. That gives a pretty good understanding of where the septic systems are around Lake George. Thanks to Randy Rath and Jason Pokinos up top. He is our new analyst. I forwarded out a quick summary spreadsheet that shows, the current first cut understanding of the septics that are within 300 feet, 500 feet of Lake George and all the DEC regulated streams. So we have some basic knowledge to work from, and what we're going to be asking throughout most of this meeting, Chris Round is going to be kind of taking us through, here's what we think we understand, here's the studies that we think we're privy to, and then how do we take that and synthesize that into the best understanding that we can get with septic systems around Lake George, and then ultimately talk about, is this something that we need to move forward with some type of a program to help protect Lake George and public health and safety, of course. So that's kind of where we think this committee is going to be for the next few months, and we very much appreciate your guys' input. So thanks, Ken.
Okay. The Lake George Park Commission authority and history related to the wastewater systems. We all know that back in the early 90s, it was vacated by a court for lack of analysis related to whether the regs would potentially force the expansion of sewer districts with potentially increased development and cost to taxpayers. That was the last effort of the Park Commission, stopped by court order. And we've always talked about it over the years, and we finally have found some time. You all remember that we're kind of on a restricted budget and restricted staffing and whatnot, and we handle the projects as they come along. So now that we're here, we've jumped into it with all 3 feet and moving ahead. I guess, David, is this where Chris wants to take on and to explain his role, expand on it?
I think that would be a good place to go, at least what Ken and I had talked about. Once we get to the meat of the issue, it'd be great, as Chris is kind of moderating the session, the reason we have all you guys here is we're hoping if the topic that we're talking on, you guys can jump in and express your experiences, give your thoughts, your opinions. Ultimately, we're going to try to synthesize some of these ideas into a document that makes sense. And that's one of the reasons that we brought Chris on board. He's very good at doing these types of things, and his assistance is appreciated. So with that, Ken and Chris, I guess we move into it.
Great. Thanks, Dave. As Dave and Ken have mentioned, we're going to do a couple things in this initial phase, and one is to gather and analyze information that's available to us already, and then we're also going to conduct a literature review to further substantiate, what is the impact of septic systems on water quality and public health. There's a lot of research out there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to establish a foundation for a program as we move forward. And then we also want to analyze and scan the environment, and a lot of this has been done already, and we want to put this all in one place, is what programs are out there. And it's great to have DEC and DOH on the call to understand what inspection type of programs, registration programs are out there, what's proven effective, how would you modify an existing program so that it's best meets the needs of the lake community, and then take all that information and synthesize it to be of value to this exercise. And I think kind of probably our first question for each of the committee members is, what information is out there? What have been your experiences with respect to, as an example, Chris, we know the Septic Summit, you brought people to the table to help understand the impacts of septic systems on water quality, and then help understand the failure rate of septic systems. And so it would be helpful to just kind of go around the room. What information is out there? Who should we be talking to? And then that'll kind of lead us to the next step. I know, Sean, anything else you want to fill in there?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's the charge that I understand we have, and just looking forward to helping facilitate the process and being of value where we can.
Okay. Perhaps because we all will step on each other just due to the Zoom system, if when you have some comments, just throw a thumb up or something like that. And well, I think Justin's still there to monitor who does and who doesn't.
Yep, I'm
You
here.
can give it the high sign. So somebody want to jump in and be number one?
Susan Wilson, go for it.
So, okay. As I mentioned earlier, Bolton developed their septic inspection program, which became effective in September of 2019. We spent quite a time searching other programs around the country to get some ideas as to which way we wanted to go. We first decided that we would do it on a townwide basis because 85% of the watershed, excuse me, of Bolton is in the watershed. So that was our kicking off point, that it was going to include the entire basin, the entire town. And we spent quite a while developing the program itself. It's run fairly smoothly. At the outset, our planning staff, the entire staff retired within months of it being active. So we didn't do as much monitoring in the beginning as we would have liked. But you know, we're on board with that now, getting it done. And it actually has been running more smoothly in terms of the inspections than we anticipated. People are cooperating and the inspections are being done and they're filed with the town. And we think it's, you know, a fairly decent success. We're not finding too many systems that have actually failed. We've had 3 that had to have been, we've done 168 inspections so far. We've had 3 that had to be repaired and 11 systems were replaced. So we're finding issues, but people are pretty cooperative.
Thanks, Susan. You know, in your ramp up in establishing your program, were there resources that you found particularly useful, or how did you arrive at the programs that you have? I guess that's what.
We researched and we reached out to people. We reached out to Chris. We reached out to one of the issues we knew we would face was having enough inspectors. So we reached out to a company called Onsite. It's Eric Murdoch. And we had a program run where he would train inspectors for us. So our inspectors are certified through Onsite. They're Bolton certified inspectors. We've had no issues because the realtors were concerned that there would be issues with having enough inspectors. That has not been an issue at all. So Onsite helped us and Chris.
Thanks.
So when they replace, you require them to replace with a specific type system, is that correct?
That's in our new septic ordinance. If a new system is going to be installed on an island or on a pond, it requires an ETU. If a new system is going to require a variance from a water body or a well, wetlands, there will be no variance given. They will also have to install an ETU. That's according to the ordinance that we just adopted in June.
So you said that you had 11 systems that had to be replaced, but you said that there were no failures.
No, we did have failures. We had, there were no failures among those 11. They were not up to the current code. The other 3 failed and those were repaired.
And the failure, do you describe, was there sewage going into our lake in the failure situation, or you just felt that the system was not working the way it should have been working?
I don't know if anything reached the lake. They're getting more detail on me on the specifics of the failure. But you know, that 3 of them, as I say, were able to be repaired. 11 were not compliant with our current code. They were working, but they weren't compliant with the current code, which we would permit, but they chose to have them replaced.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Maybe I'm going to jump to Tom, because I know, Tom, you had a role and involvement in developing the new regulation. So what we're trying to get at is, like, what work have you performed or are currently performing that we should be aware of, like, hey, a new septic system regulation. But what we're interested in at this juncture is, like, who are those? What are those resources that you're, and whether it's an individual or an organization, who are you talking to that has particular insight on this particular, line of work, right? Whether it's a lake association, whether it's low flows clearinghouse, whether it's EPA, DEC, DOH. And Tom, I don't know, is there something that you found particularly useful in the development of your program with the town of Bolton?
You talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. All of the above are excellent resources and have been consulted. I was mostly reviewing the program after it was drafted, so I didn't do a lot of grassroots research on that. Sue can elaborate on that, but and Chris probably can as well. But I was involved with trying to make sure that it flowed smoothly, and I reviewed the program after it was originally drafted. But in a far more broad-reaching answer to your question, I go to a lot of other states. I go to other manufacturers, as well as we've gone to low flows in the past, EPA, DEC, DOH, all of those resources. But a lot of other states, I really, and the Massachusetts test facility, I like consulting them. I like picking their brain and seeing what they found works and doesn't work.
Yeah, and we're familiar with them through the Septic Summit, and I know, University of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, those our New England states seem to have they're fairly progressive and fairly rigorous in
they're pretty proactive. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I see Dave Floyd. Dave, you want to chime in, please?
Yeah, I'd like to know, Bolton is talking about 160 inspections. How do you inspect a septic tank or a septic system? How is that done? We had a presentation given to us by Queensberry, and it looked pretty pricey with the inspections they were doing. They were actually digging up. Is that what Bolton was doing also?
What Bolton is doing is we're requiring that the septic tank, if there's a septic tank, that has to be emptied upon before the inspector gets there. The distribution box has to be revealed. If there are issues with the septic tank that can't be seen, we will permit a camera, to the use of a camera to go in and determine what needs to be done. So there are options for the homeowner. The homeowner is provided with a checklist of what they need to have prepared before the inspector gets there.
So you're looking at the tank in the distribution box. How about the drain field?
No, we're not going into the drain field unless there's an issue. We're aware of an issue with anything. And, the camera, I'm not sure how far the camera actually can get into the drain field. Tom may know that. I see him putting his hand up.
Well, I was going to jump in on the leaching system part of it. It's been a while since I looked at the exact wording of your regulation, but generally you've got to review around the leaching area, see what conditions are prevalent, see if there's any evidence of groundwater or sewage, those kinds of things. You're looking for extraneous evidence as opposed to direct evidence by digging up the system.
And to accommodate that, it's interesting, I've been on maybe 10 town of Queensberry septic inspections with Dave Hatton. They're pretty comprehensive. They require the distribution box to be uncovered, the septic tank to be uncovered. And then one of the staff goes into the house, runs every room, every faucet, every fixture to make sure they're tied in to the septic tank. But they don't pump the tank first. What they want to hear is the water going into the tank. They look in the distribution box while the tank is still full, because the way they can tell whether a field is failing or not is if there's any water in the discharge lines of the D-box. If there's water halfway up the lines in the D-box, that means the water in the infiltration bed is not infiltrating as it should, and they would call that a failure of the system. So it's that extra step. It takes them more time because they have to have everything uncovered first. They do the inspection, they schedule the hauler for about an hour after. The hauler comes, they pump out the tank, and that's when they look at the baffles and make sure everything is fine with the tank and whatnot. So it's pretty comprehensive. And in talking to Dave in the town, he says that's really where they're finding a lot of their issues is when they're looking in the distribution box. And Dave was very, very direct at our presentation to our board, saying there's a lot of lake associations and partnerships across New York State. And I've spoken to pretty much everyone I can find. And only a few of them have the distribution box uncovered, but all of the inspectors kind of fought for that as something that was important because it's really the only way without invasive digging that you can identify whether the field itself isn't infiltrating as it should. So that was really interesting to learn from Dave in the town of Queensbury.
Thanks, Dave. That's our experience with respect to the inspections is that you will discover more or get better evidence of failure if you're there to observe the pump out.
Could I make a comment here?
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Actually, Dave Floyd, to shed a little bit more light on your question. I have the town of Bolton Landings ordinance in front of me, and because I'm working towards getting the same type of ordinance for the town of Dresden, and we're basing it on Bolton Landings. One thing that Bolton Landing goes, I think, one more step than the town of Queensbury is, and I had trouble hearing Dave, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that the on-site wastewater treatment system inspection, I'm reading this, shall first require a pre-inspection surcharge of the septic tank and absorption field with an average daily flow volume. That is, you're going to flush all the toilets, run all the water for a period of time to check the system for failure prior to pumping it out. And of course, that has to be done by a contractor with a valid license. But I don't think Queensbury's ordinance does say that. And I think that's very important.
Chris Nowitzki is echoing that. I'd like to just pivot away from our focus on inspection methodology, if I might. And I'd like to go to Tom Snow. Tom, you mentioned your background. We're familiar with the city watershed septic replacement program, long history there. Can you speak to, just in a general way, perhaps basic components of that program, and any insight you might offer there, and then we'll maybe have a follow-up to that.
Sure. We've been doing septic inspections. Actually, we passed a requirement as part of, I don't want to get into, bore you with details on specific permits, but through one of our permitting requirements through the municipal separate storm sewer system program, we call it the MS4, both in the east of Hudson portion of the New York City watershed, which is Westchester County, northern Westchester County, essentially all of Putnam County and southern Dutchess County. We've had a septic inspection program for the last, I think we're going on 12 years now. And essentially what it does is it requires the homeowners to pump out and inspect their septic systems once every 5 years. It doesn't go into the great detail I think that's being described previously. We don't require the D-box to be uncovered, but the actual homeowner hires a septic hauler who is licensed and is certified to do the septic inspections. And that septic inspection is part of it is a pump out, as Dave was mentioning, to look at the baffles, the T's, and if there's effluent filters and whatnot. So we've been doing this for almost 10 plus years, and it's been administered locally. In Westchester County, it's administered by the county, Westchester County itself, and in Putnam County, it's administered by the individual towns. And like I said, each town has passed an ordinance or local codes, local requirements that individuals have to do that. And then they send all that information in. We have a septic inspection form that's filled out by the haulers, and that information is then sent to either the municipality or to the county. And all that information is, maintained, if you want, in a database. So they're tracked, and everything's, all that information is kept up to date. On the east of Hudson side, it was mentioned, I think Chris Novitsky, you mentioned Leo Labuda. I've worked with Leo Labuda. I actually sit on the Catskill Watershed Corporation board, have been for the last 20 plus years, where we implement a septic replacement and repair program. And as part of that is septic maintenance program, which is, again, pump outs, inspections, again, to try to make sure that folks, once you put a septic system in the ground, it's just like, changing your oil in your car or going and getting your car inspected. We encourage folks to do that. So we have a very long-standing maintenance program, pump outs, inspection program in the west of Hudson. It's not necessarily mandated like we have in the east of Hudson, but it's a very effective program where we provide, funding, or I should say the Catskill Watershed Corporation provides funding to help offset the costs of pump outs. So, as I said, this is sort of, from my perspective in doing, watershed management over, 25 years here at DEC, this is something that, Department of Health recommends folks, do pump outs and inspections of their septic systems. Design manual says every 2 to 3 years. I do, I pump out my system on my septic tank every few years. I did it last year. So this is kind of, standard, watershed management, watershed protection stuff, that we do, at least I see from my perspective, sort of watershed protection 101.
Yep. And Tom, would you have knowledge of how many programs that exist like this in New York?
How many to this detail?
Yeah. Well, so I think one of the things we're interested in documenting is, we're trying to establish a foundation or basis that there's a lot of literature out there that to implement the program. We're curious in saying, it'd be nice to be able to say whether it's anecdotally, X number of communities, X number of lake associations, X number of regional planning entities, have this or require this. I'm just trying to kind of like a
Well, like Skinny Atlas Lake, which is
yeah,
the other,
exactly.
other under unfiltered drinking water supply. Canandaigua Lake. Trying to remember if I don't think all the Finger Lakes have an aggressive septic inspection program, but there are a fair number of these programs throughout New York.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Maybe I know Chris had his hand up and I lost where Chris. Well, maybe his question was asked or answered. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. I had a few comments as we talk about this. I think one of the things, and some of this is a lack of continuity or concern of mine. One of the things we talk about failures, what is failure? Some view failure as the ponding or the flow into the lake is I think, was asked earlier, well, to me, and I think others, failure is if we're leaching into the lake. So you may not actually see, sludge going into the lake. That doesn't mean that a system isn't failing. One of the things, and it was talked about, taking a look at the science, the nutrient levels in the lake, we know the nutrient levels haven't changed much in the lake. And our hypothesis and why we focused on algae is that those nutrients are being taken up by the biology in the lake, by the algae, because Lake George is so low nutrient, so low productive, that whenever anything becomes available, it gets taken right up. So, phosphorus hasn't changed much in, 20 or so years. The soluble reactive phosphorus has. which is key. So I think, the work that the LGA did showing caffeine in the lake, well, we know that's not coming from rain. So I think, the science is out there. The soils is very important. I think we need to bring that into, because the soils is where the majority of your important treatment is going to occur. And as we've seen around the large wastewater treatment plants, we have rapid percolating soils, which is great. The water will go down, but the problem with that is the water also comes out pretty quick as we see the seeps that pop into Westbrook. And so basically we almost have surface discharges. So I think, those can be considered failures. So Lake George is a drinking water source, as we all know. I appreciate what Tom was just saying. And I got to admit, when we talk about Leo was kind of my guru when I started. So I was pretty fortunate to work with him back in the day. But, our study with the town of Lake George, the septic initiative, 2/3 of the systems are either antiquated past their life expectancy or they haven't even maintained them. And that's a great point, Tom, and something I hope that can get put into a program is maintenance. That a homeowner is a utility operator, and they have to maintain their system. That will prevent 90% of the problems that you'll encounter. So, in just one final thought, I rambled around on you, Chris. Sorry, but
Nope,
some of the
all good.
ideas. I think appreciate the great work Sue's done in Bolton. But when you compare Bolton with Queensbury, I think that kind of shows a bit of the lack of consistency around the lake. And that's something that I see, from town to town, ordinance to ordinance, where, if the park commission moves forward with this, there will be consistency around this basin. And I think that's a very important thing, so that everybody's on the same page, because 160 systems is great to inspect that and take a look at that. Queensbury, the presentation they gave to the park commission, it was around 100 at that time back in March, but they were finding 40% needed significant replacements and another 40% needed some, not as major upgrades. So a lot more upgrades in Queensbury's inspections. So I just think continuity and consistency in the applications, and that's one of the main reasons. So
Appreciate that, Chris. Tom, I think you wanted to comment on Chris, then I'm going to come back to another question. Go ahead.
I want to echo what Chris said, and I think we started to focus on inspections and pump outs, and that usually picks up operational failures. What we call operational failures doesn't always pick up treatment failures, which is what Chris is alluding to, which is more important in the long run. And operational failures, meaning a tank that's in bad shape or a D-box that's not functioning, may lead to a treatment failure, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a treatment failure. Whereas if the leaching system is poorly sited, poorly built, it may be leaching untreated effluent directly to a stream or to the lake, and you may not see the evidence. It really takes a trained eye to surmise what's going on and to really point fingers at a system that is probably in treatment failure as opposed to operational failure. So we really need to differentiate the two and keep both in mind as we go through this program.
I think that's a really good point, Tom. I think one could infer that, systems built before a particular year might be more, and it's all, you mentioned, Chris, it's all very highly variable based on site conditions, right?
Absolutely.
Or the actual failure. A lot of failure occurs at construction as well. So
right.
You could have the perfect system not properly installed.
Let me give you a quick example. You could have a cesspool that's sited on a sand plateau that's got 80 feet of sand before you get to groundwater, and there's no surface water nearby. you've got excellent treatment by the time it reaches some water
Yeah.
supply, but you've got a cesspool.
Yeah, it's non-compliant system.
It's not
right? Yeah,
compliant,
yeah.
but it may provide much better treatment than a lot of these brand new systems that are located around the lake now.
Well, that's it. So an inspection, and so we've because the lightning rod or the focal point was inspection, when to do inspection, at time of transaction, et cetera. We're focused right on in that. But I want to ask the broader question. One, ideally, the goal is a no threat to water quality from on-site septic disposal, right? And inspection is one part of that, one tactic to get to that objective or to that goal. I guess, are there, and maybe this is a question for Tom Snow or for Kevin, you know, is this type of program exist on a state level in another state? Why is it this, you know, if this is a threat, if this is not unique to Lake George, you know, we have unique conditions. Is this being done at a state level anywhere? And is there something we're looking for other resources to point to, and that's why I asked that question.
I mean, are you saying, is this a requirement that everybody have to pump out their septic
Is
system?
in Oregon, does Oregon require, you know, you know, do they an inspection program, replacement program,
I'm not aware of any formal statewide program.
Okay.
Maybe Kevin knows. But I guess going back to the previous comment that was made in those, in the situations where you have the treatment system is not necessarily up to par. A lot of times what we will do both in the east and west of Hudson is dye test those systems and surge them, you know, with 200 something gallons of water and the dye, depending on, you know, your perk rates and whatnot through the soils, you may actually see the dye, you know, in the lake, or in the case of, you know, the west of Hudson portion of the New York City watershed, you may see it in the adjacent stream. So, I mean, there are ways to determine whether or not the existing system is you know, adequately treating the sanitary waste, and we routinely do dye tests all the time to determine that.
I think Joe, you had your hand up, and I want to ask her or let Kevin answer that. If you could just wait a second, Joe. Kevin, can you speak to that? Do you have knowledge of, like, just, we're trying to, you know, make sure we understand the universal knowledge that's out there.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other states that have a statewide program. I know if you look at the Finger Lakes in New York, there's at least 4 that have some type of septic inspection. So Cayuga Lake, Owasco, Skinny Atlas, and Canandaigua. I'm pretty sure if you look at Owasco Lake, they have an inspection frequency based on proximity to the lake. So I think the closer you are to the lake, the more frequently you have to have your system inspected. Other than that, there's not a ton that I'm aware of in New York.
All right. Great. Joe, I'm sorry, come back to you.
I was wondering, Susan, what's the funding arrangement that you have in Bolton?
For the inspections,
Yes.
it's all incumbent on the property owner.
How about, do you have a report that you have issued like quarterly or something that we could look at?
We're just finishing that up. As I mentioned, we lost our planning staff when it first went into, so they're doing catch up now. So
Okay.
I can have that. And if I could, I don't mean to take more time, but just for clarification, the checklist that we provide to the homeowner includes that the water is on in the structure, the inlet and outlet covers of the septic tank or holding tanks are exposed, the distribution box is exposed and the cover is open for inspection, seepage pits are exposed and cover is open, any pump stations open and covers exposed, any grinder pumps being exposed. The hauler is scheduled to pump the tank after the water flow test is completed. So there is a water flow test that's done prior to the pumping of the tank.
So I know I'll just take advantage of you, Susan. So, you know, this is all about, and Tom pointed to trying to find operational failures. Do you look at any other evidence of a compliant system? Like, so do you know that the system is sized appropriately?
Yes,
Is it, do you have adequate separation to drinking water sources and so on? So it's one thing to inspect the system that's perhaps functioning, but are you ensuring compliance?
We require that the inspector report on the size of the tank in terms of, and to test for any leakage. In terms of proximity to other wells and things like that, we look at that information when it comes back into us.
Okay.
Do you also correlate to number of bedrooms and so forth in the house, in the residence?
That's part of the inspection process, is the homeowner must provide all that information. But the correlation, I don't believe they're taking, they're looking at it. I'm not sure what the planning office is doing, if anything, at this point about it.
Great. We've been focusing on this. We're kind of gravitated towards, the how and of septic inspection. Somebody else that wants to speak on this kind of topic, and maybe we can change the conversation just a little bit from here, move forward. Nobody? Great. Well,
Chris, this is
go ahead, Tom.
Snow from DC again. I think Chris brought up a really good point on the soils. I actually looked at all the soils within the close proximity to the lake, just to look at, whether or not what type of system would they be problematic. I mean, I didn't map them, but I know, the Lake George, report did, and I think did a fabulous job, and would echo, I think, one of the comments that was made earlier, that, that type of analysis being done broader or beyond just the town of Lake George, I think would be really helpful and beneficial. But, certainly knowing and understanding where your problematic soils are, and then sort of looking from there, how many houses sort of fall, or residences or structures fall on those soils, and whether or not, if you have a foot of soil to bedrock kind of thing, then, obviously a conventional system is certainly not going to work. And even shallow trenches isn't going to work in that sort of situation. So yeah, you would need something, and whether or not a ETU or advanced treatment unit, it's the terminology I generally use, but anyways, that kind of analysis to looking at from the soils, I do want to just, echo what Chris was saying, how important that would actually be.
Chris, can I piggyback off that?
Go right ahead, Tim.
So a lot of the discussion so far has been how on inspection programs. I think the critical piece to the study that the town did with the fund actually dials back before the how and starts with the why. And Chris did mention soils. I mentioned earlier the inventorying. He mentioned earlier algal testing. And what I'll mention in depth now is the other aspect of our report, which went beyond analyzing the systems, the age, the sizing, the quality, the type of system that people have on their properties. We also analyze site suitability, which is another critical component to locating sanitary disposal. Beyond soils, which is probably the most important, we looked in the report, we looked at depth to bedrock, we looked at proximity to water bodies, we looked at topography. So we not only inventoried and analyzed the systems themselves, we also analyzed the suitability of the land where the systems were. And that was we were able to take those two things, combine them through an algorithm created by more scientific minds than myself, and map and turn those into maps. And so we have visually helpful, graphically represented maps, color-coded, that show us what areas are suitable for sanitary systems and what are not. And then we overlaid our ratings. When we analyzed the systems, we gave them ratings. Were they brand new ETUs? Were they 50-year-old cesspools? We overlaid those ratings onto that site suitability and really came up with an excellent model to understand where our focuses were. And we went a step further and we did water quality analysis and algae monitoring. And we were able to tie those high priority areas where we found terrible site suitability or many inefficient or substandard systems. And we were able to actually tie those areas to bad water quality tests in the lake probably from these areas of substandard systems. So, beyond these inspection programs, which I know is a main focus of this committee, part of the reason it was set up, it's been discussed at the county level. There is a push at the park commission and watershed level. The analyzing, and I know it's part of this endeavor, but the analyzing of not just the systems and how to come up with an inspection program, but the analyzing of the systems that exist and the site suitability and the water around it. We should be looking at potentially incorporating that into anything that comes out of this, because that is the comprehensive look. And we actually did in our report, we had recommendations, and one of them was a basin-wide report, exactly what we did around the entire lake to understand where the problems were. And another one was a septic inspection program. So.
Thanks, Dan. Is everybody familiar with the report? We can make sure everybody has a copy of that. We'll perhaps there's, we've talked about a number of items, and what we'll do is we'll collect these things and put them on either a share file site so that everybody has access to them, can see this. And as we collect information that's of value, while we'll be summarizing it in some form, we'll make sure that everybody has access to it so they can have their own takeaways from it, because people read things differently, right?
So one of the things we're looking at, Chris, is taking stock of all the documents that may be out there. That was one of the purposes of today's meeting, is for people like Dan and Chris to say, yeah, here's a document that's specifically reflective of Lake George. It's very good. Here's some other ones. And then we want to create a library before our next meeting that's on the Park Commission website, the septic page, that says, all right, here's a synopsis of this report. Most of them have abstracts anyway, and go through and take a look at these. So those should be populated within the next couple of weeks on our website.
Great, thanks, Dave. So, I think we're all ready to move on, right? So I think, when we had initial conversations with Ken and with Dave, hey, one, we want to make sure, is there a scientific basis for this? And we know there's a ton of scientific literature out there. So if you have something you want to point us to in particular, we want to make sure we have it so that when we craft our summary, we'll do that. We also, in helping educate the public, we also, you've talked about failure rates of systems. And so there's failure rate information from other communities, other lake associations statewide. And so we'll publish that, whether it's, hey, 20% failure rate. So that's the reason we're doing this preventive maintenance here. So we'll bring that to the fore. We've talked about, hey, we want to understand what other programs are out there so that we can say, hey, this is not something that we've created for the universe of Lake George. This is something that exists in the real world. So we want to bring that to the front. One of the things, and Dave started out with, Randy Rath had done like a census. We're trying to come up with like how many septic systems exist around the lake. When we participated in the with the LGA and the development of the Lake George Data Atlas, we looked at it watershed wide. We established the watershed boundaries. We looked at community systems, public systems, and then we looked at buildings or residential development outside of either community or public septic systems. And it's on the order of 6,000 development, 6,000 residential units. And I'm not sure how much of that's commercial, because most of the commercial activity is taking place within a district or a community system. And so the number is significant, within the watershed. And I think some of the inspection programs that we've been talking about have been, well, do we limit the inspection program to 500 feet or 1,000 feet? Or Dan, you mentioned when we assisted with the town septic initiative, do we want to make sure that the inspection system captures those locations that are perhaps not on the most suitable sites or soils? And so there's this, you know, and all this will get thrown into the mix, and we'll bring it all back to discussion. But one of the challenges with creating a census, right? First, you need a septic program, an inspection program to like capture all the septic systems, because there are a fair number of septic systems out there where there is no record, right? There's not a building permit. There's not a prior inspection. We have Washington County and Warren County. We have county building departments doing inspections. We have local communities doing inspections. And so there's a universe of systems out there. Any insights on how best to conduct a census? You know, just not that that's something that's going to happen in this first phase, but we want to be prepared for that. And we're interested in any insight you guys might have. Sean's got a great idea. Sean.
Is anybody on the call familiar with the Twist software from the EPA? Has anybody come across that? It's essentially a tool that the EPA has created for essentially just this purpose. It's tracking, right? It's a software program where once you are identifying septic systems in whatever region you're looking at, you can catalog, you know, their age, their last inspection, pump out, their issues, their proximity to a water body, any complaints that have been called in, perhaps from neighbors, that kind of thing. So that's more of a depository or a data management system, not necessarily, you know, the program itself, right? But I am interested in finding out how folks have used it and if it's effective for them, because you can do it in any way you want to do, you know.
And just to speak to that, so in the data atlas, that information was not readily available. So when we wanted to look at that and well, how would we say how many septic systems? Well, not everybody has their building permit system online or in a spreadsheet. It's paper, right? And so you can imagine the data collection effort that might be associated with that. But you know, you have to start somewhere, right? And in order to make progress on this. So we're just curious about that. You know, I guess I'll leave it at that. That's one of the challenges in front of us. So just to put that out there.
And some of the GIS information isn't always accurate, right? Like as Dan Baruch and I know, the Caldwell Sewer District is bigger than the actual public sewer system within the Caldwell Sewer District, right? And so GIS might report back, hey, these folks are on public sewer when they're not. So sort of ground truthing would be required, of course, in that any kind of census.
You know, achieving the information, not ever trying to forget that who our final customer is. And our final customer is the homeowners, the property owners, the septic system owners, operators, et cetera. Between the new LGA and some other bodies, there's a fantastic mailing list out there of every property owner and boat owner on the lake, boat operator. Maybe as we moving along and get this thing plugging along, we consider a self-mailer per se, a self-questionnaire where this body sends me, a property owner, a questionnaire about my septic system. And maybe we get a 20% response rate, but that sounds like a lot more than we've got today. And people that might volunteer to do self-certifications just to assure themselves or be a test model. We're going to have to convince some people that this is really good for them, and get the public involved at some point not too far down the road.
Chris, you guys did something like that.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in if I could, Joe. Ken, that's a great idea. We did that with Dan and with the Lake George Septic Initiative. We sent out a 1-2-page survey form. And we divided the town similar to the study that Dave sent out on the numbers. You know, they studied properties within 500 feet of the lake and 100 feet of tributary. So it's roughly about, when you take out the commercial properties, because we were looking primarily residential. It was just over 400 properties. So we sent out surveys. We broke it into 4 phases. Phase 1, we put a little more legwork into it, meaning we had several follow-ups to the surveys. We got about a 43% response from homeowners. That was in the Diamond Point area. Overall, townwide with the report, it was about 33%, which is by industry standards for a government mailing survey, like twice what the average would be. So I think, that's a great idea. The one thing with that was you tended to get people responding that knew their system, which just is human nature, so we didn't really, people that didn't know their system really didn't respond. We got very few that, although a couple did stick in my mind where they say, I've lived here 60 years. I don't even know where my tank is. I've never had a problem, so. But to me, that's the first indication you got a problem, because it means you haven't done any maintenance in 60 years as well. So, but yeah, that's very helpful. And I think the one thing to go off of that is that as you look forward, there can be varying, if there is a program that's contemplated by the commission, it can be either more regulated, you can have staff, Park Commission staff going out doing inspections, or it can be more fall on the homeowners. So similar to the way the docks and boats are, so that, every year you got to renew your dock permit or whatever, your boat. Maybe every 5 years, you got to renew your septic permit. And, with that, you got to send in that you had your system pumped out and certified, and attach that to the form and send that into, send it into Dave Wick, what the heck. And, so those are just some things, but survey's a real good place to start. And I think Kathy Lombard actually did some of that, over in her bay as well.
Yeah. Remembering continually that the Park Commission is not going to just issue, if we get to that point, issue a suggestion. It's going to end up being a regulation, which whatever we do has got to be done properly, so that, because it has to pass the test in Albany for it to become a Lake George Park Commission reg, so to speak. So that's the target we have to keep an eye on. We got about 6 eyes going out here, a lot of different targets, and someday we're going to have time all together. Chris, we have more to expound on.
Thanks, Ken. That's been helpful. And Chris, you're kind of segueing into like the next thing, it's like, so one, we want to talk about the science, and I think we've talked that, and we'll capture that. There's a lot of science out there. We've talked about, hey, existing inspection programs, and we're already into the nitty gritty of inspections and et cetera. Ken, you mentioned, we've got to meet a like a state test, or we have to make sure that we properly substantiate and then craft a program. And I'm curious from you or from Dave, is there something in specific to that we haven't talked about? I mean, you've given us some direction, and like these are the first steps that we have to undertake. So that's one question. And then the other question I want to put, and it's to Dave, and then anybody on the call, is a lot of times we forget about, and Ken, you mentioned this, our customer, the public. And so there's a public component, and that's really important as we develop this, is to not get too far out ahead of the public. And there's and so what's the appropriate public engagement process for this first exercise? So Dave, I threw some stuff back at you.
Yeah. So it's important everybody's understanding that we are a New York State agency, and there's been no shortage of opinion pieces out there saying, I don't know why the Park Commission hasn't done this yesterday. It needs to happen tomorrow, immediately. And what I've responded back is to do that is a recipe for failure. There's a process. The people have to be engaged. We have to prove that this is an issue that is critical to Lake George, and that it has the support of our partners around the lake, that if we're moving forward in a way that we haven't explained the need well enough or demonstrated the need well enough, and we don't have the support of the communities around Lake George, it's destined to fail. So this whole process and the collaboration that we have with you folks and ultimately the greater public is absolutely critical, kind of moving this ball forward. What we need to do is, Chris is kind of taking us through these steps, is take a look, number one, at the science behind the issue. Clearly, there's no shortage of areas that have instituted septic inspection programs. The challenge that I've seen so far is every single septic program that I've contacted across the state, and I think I found most of them, there is not one I've found that has done an environmental impact statement that has culminated the body of scientific knowledge with the local issue and then come forth with a document that says here. I would love to see that. I haven't seen it yet, and that's what I'm throwing out to you guys. If you know of one of those documents or several of those documents, that'd be exceptionally helpful to us, because that will kind of give us a little bit of a leg up on where we're going right now, because we're going to be creating a lot of this from draft. So we need to understand the population of septic systems around Lake George, like I said, to the best of our ability, and we've talked about that. We need to get the best of the science. Some may support this direction, some may say it's really not critical of an issue. We're going to put that all on the website, and we're going to highlight all of what it is out there. We have to be transparent. And then once we have that information, then we're going to be looking for a clear discussion on, is this important enough to do for Lake George, yes or no? And I think the population in the room says, clearly right now it is, but we have to substantiate that to everybody in here is the choir. There's no shortage of people that have already reached out to me that say, is this just the next thing because you guys got bored and you haven't done a regulation in 2 months? And the answer is no, but this is important enough to do. It's our statute to do. We have to do it right. So what we think we can do in the next probably month and a half is populate a lot of that information together in a way that makes sense. And then, as we've alluded to, this has to be very public, whether it's a survey out to the residents throughout the watershed, or going around like Joe Stanek and John Petticat and Dean Cook did under the invasive species program, and have some community workshop meetings to talk about this issue. It has to be public, and it has to be where people feel engaged in the process and they have their say in court, and we can explain to them why we think it's important. If we can't stand on our own 2 feet with substantiating why we think this is important enough, then we're not going to get support in Albany to make something happen. So it's a stepwise process. So when I have on one of our agendas here that we expect this to take about 3 to 6 months just to get to that point, there's a reason for it. And we just have to all be aware. I know we have some media on the call today. There's people following this pretty closely, and government doesn't move very quickly, of course, but when it does, we can substantiate what we're doing. In my 9 years here, we've had 4 sets of regulations that we've implemented at the Lake George Park Commission. So it's a fair amount of work that's already been accomplished. We need to do this one right as well. So I think that's kind of where we want to go over the next month and a half. And all of your guys' expertise and resources, if you can send whatever studies, information, ideas on collating this data to me, I can forward that out to Chris and our committee. And then we want to, by our next meeting, provide you with a much tighter summary of what we found, and then we can start to make some decisions collectively as to how to move forward. So thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Ethan.
I think Dave makes a really good point. Being this very public exercise. I think as we get into looking at the science behind septic systems, we should also look at the fiscal impacts on, residents. A really good understanding of what people are actually going to need to invest if we do make rules based on the science. And I think to be successful, I think there should be someone, whether it's the charge of this group or not, trying to explore how to incentivize participation in the data gathering, or how do you incentivize people to do the right thing? Because we know not a carrot can be more effective than a stick sometimes, or a combination of the two.
Thanks, Ethan. I think Dave, I think I've heard what we wanted to do in this first call, unless Sean and there's something else that you want to drill down into. And I was going to save like the last part of this to say, like, what what do you, offer your insight about process or program? And we've already heard some of that throughout the call. And Ethan, you just chimed in with like, well, how do we make sure we're doing appropriately engaging the public, and how do we, what will be the, what will help us ensure success in this initial phase? And I've heard some of that. I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to have maybe a closing comment, and then I don't know, Dave or Ken, if you want to wrap it up after that.
I just had this is Tom Snow from
Yeah,
BEC
Tom.
again. Just a quick question to me, and I don't know all the municipalities around Lake George, but from what Susan was saying, a couple of the municipalities already have an inspection program that they're implementing. So I'm assuming that the municipalities sort of did some outreach, and Susan, maybe you can confirm that as part of your passing your local ordinances, you had engaged the communities, and, obviously there was an interest by the communities to do that. Would there be a reason why the other communities would be thinking differently, or is what some of the things that have been done already, as far as outreach and surveying and all that, since it's been done and some municipalities have already acted on that? To me, it sounds like there's local interest there to do it at the municipal level. Am I correct in that?
I'm great. Somebody from the outside asked some of the obvious questions. Dan, you have a.
Susan, you want to go first, and then I can jump in.
Sure. We had public hearings before passing it, of course, and we had very little feedback or pushback, I should say, other than from local realtors. And what we did then is we met after it was actually passed. We met with local realtors to examine their concerns specifically, because our ordinance is it's required at the transfer of property. And we provided them with the information they needed. We helped them with any of their concerns and advised them that as long as it didn't impact our bottom line, we were willing to listen. And I think they walked away. In fact, I know they walked away pleased with, maybe not totally pleased with the ordinance, but pleased with the information they were provided. And they've been cooperative.
Great, thank you.
So Tom, I will answer the question from the other side of the coin. I think a lot of people on this call probably already know what I'm going to say, but ironically enough, we are the municipality that developed that septic initiative program report, and ironically enough, we do not have the inspection program. I will tell you that from our end, part of the reason why is political in nature. I would probably say that part of the reason why any other municipality might not be so hot on this is going to be partially political in nature. We had talked about it when we finished the report. It is one of the recommendations in our report. We were ready to submit grants to get some more money to implement a program. And, some communities here have more pitchfork groups than others, I guess I'll call them kindly. When we have something on the agenda, we get a relatively large group of people that want to show up with pitchforks. So we kind of abandoned any thought a little over 2 years ago of implementing an inspection program at the town. Now it's still being discussed. It's being discussed again because the county is considering a countywide law. I will tell you that probably another reason that municipalities, maybe smaller, more rural ones, won't be too hot on this, if they're not assuming, but if there's any that aren't, it might be based on resource. My office, I'm a professional planner and I have a code enforcement officer. We are extremely busy, but it would be something that my office could take the lead on, or at least help administer an inspection program for the town if we had one. Now, there are many other communities in Warren County, some specifically on the lake, that probably don't have a professional planner, probably don't have a zoning administrator. Maybe they have a code enforcement officer who has no knowledge of sanitary systems. So that's the other side of it is the resource. And through this committee and our discussion, that will probably come up, the availability of resource and who might be the entity or the consortium of folks implementing something that might be basin-wide. Is it the Park Commission? Is it, as mentioned earlier, a delegation from the state agency to the local municipalities? Is there something that, you know, allows local municipalities to opt out if they already have something, like the county law is trying to allow for? But back to Chris's point, maybe almost an hour ago, consistency is going to be critical with whatever comes out of this. We should not be saying, hey, the west side of the lake, they have way more development, so they should really be focusing on inspections, but the east side, you know, they're more rural, they don't have as many houses on the water, they don't have to worry about it. Whatever it is, it has to be consistent. Even the codes that we have and keep changing should be relatively consistent. Now I've looked through the Bolton code and the Queensberry code, and Susan, I congratulate you guys for implementing a code that requires ETUs, because if I ever propose that here, I'd be on a pitchfork, right? So
We don't have many pitchforks.
you guys are lucky.
Yeah.
You know, some might be brought out by this process, especially involving the public and having some public meetings and workshops. Half of you on this call already know who they are and what they're going to say. So we're going to be ready for it. But I think the important part is consistency, cooperation, trying to do our best to work with them and incentivize, which is what was mentioned earlier, and provide as much help as possible to the communities that don't have the help to offer. And the political aspect is going to be also critical, because, you know, the more people with pitchforks there are, the more likely the legislative entities are going to dial back or kind of step off. And, you know, as much as I'd like to see a program in this town so I can actually implement some of the stuff in our report, I'm not a legislative board member, so I don't have a say in that.
Thanks, Dan. Anybody else want to? Bill?
Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, and I don't want to get it misconstrued here. Following up on this, I think we're in a unique position right now. My read on the community is that the vast majority would support a change if we were to deem, you know, if the science drives it and we decide that that we're going to do it, we're going to do something. I think we've got quite a bit of community support to protect this lake these days. And that's not to say that Dan's not, right? I know exactly the people that he's talking about, and they're very vocal, and they're going to be against anything we do, no matter how it's put forth. And I understand that. The one thing I want to be careful of is we can erode some of that support if we overstate things. I've looked at the Queensberry data on the failure numbers, and the numbers that are being stated as failed systems, they're not actually failed systems. A system with a tank that's 250 gallons too small, but was built, the system was built 3 years ago, and the system's working perfectly, is a failure. And that shouldn't, we've got to be careful, because people will read through that and say, wait a minute, you think that you've got such a terrible problem, you're overstating it. We don't need to lie. We don't need to overstate. And I just want to be careful that we don't. That's the only reason I brought that up, and I bring it up again.
No, that's good information, Bill. I mean, we heard that earlier from Tom about operational versus treatment failure. And I tried to make the point of there's also systems that are out there, and Tom chimed in, that maybe are not compliant systems, but do not either have an operational or a treatment failure. And so it's more
goes both ways.
nuanced.
Let's be careful with it, not to overstate, and let's try not to understate.
Yeah, and
I agree, we'll miss them.
It's one I think, I know, I think that the science is out there. We need to bring it to the local level and make it real, not overstate it. I think we want to also share generically, what is the failure rate? So hey, there's a reason for inspection, right? And it's not to cause you harm, it's to protect the lake and to make sure your system continues to function in the future. And then also say, well, what is failure? Not throw that term around. Let's be specific about what that is. So, we haven't heard from a couple of folks that you want to chime in or offer anything insight on anything before we close. We're here to 4, but I know we don't necessarily need to. What we find is when we set meeting starts and finishes, we try to fill the space rather than just get our business done. And so I feel like we've gotten a lot accomplished today, but I know Kathy, you haven't spoken up. I don't know if you want to speak to anything or anybody else who hasn't spoken that's on the committee.
Which Kathy, me?
Yeah, it's Kathy Munsell, excuse me. Yep.
I would agree wholeheartedly. The science presentation of failure definitions are very, very important. Frankly, it makes absolutely no sense to me that the people would not abide by fixing their systems, knowing full well that it's affecting our whole neighborhood, our whole community. I would say that the business people and Dan, tell me when we should show up. We'll show up. There's no question here. There's not even a conversation. I'd like to participate to help people to understand that there is not a conversation. It should be something that everybody understands how critical it is. So as someone that represents the business community as well as a resident, the guidance of where I should show up when is, I would just await that.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Walt, we didn't engage you a lot in this conversation and want to give you an opportunity to talk.
Well, I've had quite a few conversations with Dave about this in the past. I think it's very important that we do this as a watershed-wide approach. I think that's the piecemeal approach that's happening already in the basin is helpful. It's moving it along, but I really think the consistency of a watershed-wide, basin-wide, park-wide approach to septic systems is critical. And I also want to echo the idea of the public outreach, and we want to help with that wherever possible. I think that transparency and that public support, getting out there to the various interest groups early on, spreading the word about this. I know there's a lot of support within our membership, but I know there might be some resistance out there with people that just don't understand the impacts or the potential impacts of septic systems. So I think that's a critical part of this too.
Yeah, thank you.
And one of the things I'd like to do, Chris, after this meeting, we'll put together some notes. This meeting is being recorded. It's going to be on our website probably tomorrow when Justin gets it up and running. What I'd like to do is just get an agreed upon set of notes internally, and then ultimately that will go out to our local town supervisors and then engage them in any conversation that they would like to have. And I've offered for years now to go to any town board meeting and start to have these conversations on any relevant topic. So I see we have Daryl Wilson, town supervisor, here as a visiting guest, but we want to make sure all supervisors are fully aware. So in X amount of time, when something comes out as a recommendation, that they've at least been aware of the details. They don't have to take their time proactively to be here on these meetings, but it's our job to reach out to them and let them know where the status is. And that's my job. We'll do that internally.
Thanks, Dave. Go ahead, Kathy, and then Dave. I'm sorry, Kathy Munsell.
Just one quick thing is, I don't know if this has been done before, but when someone says septic issues and you have no knowledge of what they are, it certainly becomes frightening. Is there someone that could do a YouTube that just shows an inspection and walks it through and says, this is all it is, everybody, it's not a crisis? Yeah. Because I think it's lack of knowledge that homeowners and the government's coming after me creates a fear that's absolutely unnecessary. So
that's a great idea.
Suggestion.
Yeah, great. Dave?
Yeah, just a thought. When you're looking at the east side of the lake, we've got 3 communities that are involved not just in one lake, involved in 2 lakes. You've got Lake Champlain with Dresden and with Putnam and Ticonderoga. And most of the population of Dresden lives on Lake Champlain, and the same for Putnam, and I think also maybe in Ticonderoga. So we've got residents over here in Dresden who are hearing some of these things saying, wait a minute, you people in Lake George are trying to put something down our throats. So it's something we've got to be very careful about.
Good
Can
insight.
Can I make a comment on that to Mr. Floyd? When I went to the town board meeting with my petitions last September, and I had Chris Novitsky with me, I had my water quality committee with me. We made it, and I spent a lot of time with an attorney trying to delineate where this septic inspection law upon property transfer was going to be. And it did not include the entire town of Dresden. The town of Dresden is very, very much aware of that. And we figured it out that it would be within the Lake George Park. So as far as Paul Ferguson, who's the town supervisor, and the board members, they are well aware that none of this will affect them. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Ken or Dave, I just want to make sure we didn't touch on this. It came up during our call. Hey, the county, Warren County, is entertaining a process. How do we dialogue, or not that we want to coordinate? They're going to do what they're going to do, but how do we make sure we're not working at odds, right? And that there's some kind of
So
engagement.
Chairwoman Seaver has been engaged to find out who she wanted as representatives on our committee, and she selected Supervisor Bramer and Ethan, who's somewhere in this picture here, as a planner. So we have a staff person and a supervisor representing the county. Sue Wilson is also representing Ron as a supervisor for the town. So I think we have some of that county leadership here. So I think we're doing okay at this stage. I'm not sure Claudia seems couldn't make it today, but she'll be brought up to speed after the fact.
Great. I'm glad.
Very good. Well,
I think
are we to the point of thank yous? I'm extremely pleased and really proud. I was once a lot younger than I am now, and I learned early in business that I didn't know everything. And one of the best ways to accomplish things is to surround yourself with people that know one heck of a lot more than you do, me do. And I thank all of you for this, and I thank you in advance because we're going to need you for a bit longer through this process. And we appreciate your participation, et cetera, and your ideas. And this is nothing but successful to the highest degree to get this kicked off and moving forward. I wish you all a happy 4th, and this is our first decent temperature day, so maybe we'll get some sun come back. And those of you in the industry, good luck for the weekend. Anybody have anything more to say as we say goodbye? We'll fly the flag, say the prayer, and away we go till tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Dave.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody.